Good morning, everybody. It's so weird because I can't actually see you, but I know you're there. I just see shapes. Well, good morning. Thank you so much for having me here. Thanks so much to Redbird. I think we have simulators 9 and 10, so we were really early customers. We have 3 simulators on campus, and really excited to be here. So I am going to talk a little bit today about the institution for sure, but that comes later. The first part is to talk about the task force that I chair. It's the FAA's Youth Access to American Jobs in Aviation Task Force. It has taken me 18 months to get that down right. And some of the work that we're engaged in, we hope to finish our report this year. And it is really all about building the workforce pipeline, especially among underserved populations, and to bring them to aviation and aerospace, which we know is going to be in demand for people for the next 20 years. So yeah, let me get going. Okay, so a little bit about the task force. 19 individuals from all different aspects of aviation. We've got major airlines. For those of you that know Joey Colleran, who just recently moved on from Redbird to another position, she's part of the task force, actually heads up one of our subcommittees, and just has been a terrific contributor. So all different aspects of aviation, some of the alphabet soup groups from Washington, D.C., middle school teacher, high school teachers, folks who run small nonprofits, take a group of students out every Saturday to an airport to rebuild an aircraft, or offering flight lessons or those kind of things. So a really interesting mix of folks who are very passionate about aviation education. And we are particularly looking at that sort of pre-university pipeline and how we get them into either academic or training programs at the collegiate level. So really focused on U.S. students. There is a corresponding, you may have heard, there's a women's board, also appointed around the same time by the FAA. They are actually looking sort of cradle to retirement and how to bring more women to aviation, whereas we are focused particularly on the underserved. We do touch a little bit on girls at that level, but they're really looking at the entire continuum. So really addressing the needs of the shortage for maintenance technicians, pilots, engineers, all across the industry. And we will make our recommendations to the FAA and Congress sometime this year. And I'll also give you a website at the end. We do public meetings, mostly by Zoom, so if you've got nothing to do and feel like sitting through a meeting for 6 hours, you're welcome to. They're not always that long, but really great information comes out of them. Okay, so the approach to the work over the last roughly 15, 18 months, we're divided into 4 subcommittees: trends, awareness building, expanded pathways, and funding. We really did this based on the charter that was given to us by the FAA, and then have a charge statement for each subcommittee and specific questions that they're working to answer. We keep the public informed about our work. Like I said, thanks to COVID, we've done all those meetings by Zoom, so the public doesn't have to come to DC. You're very much welcome to sign in, and have gotten some information from public members that have watched and said, hey, I've got a different idea, what about this, which has been terrific. And we've also had a fair number of external voices come and present to the committee to help us learn as much as we can. One of the things we decided early on as a task force was that we probably weren't going to come up with some new great program. There are new great programs, Sun and Fun being just one example, all across the country, right? It was how to take those things to scale and really engage in a more nationwide effort to recruit students to aviation and aerospace. So we've had, some of the usual suspects, but also some that are interesting and might be entryways. So Black Girls Who Code, Black Girls Who Drone. We've had, what are the ways that students might get interested in aviation and aerospace that are coming on? Urban air mobility. We had Embraer come and talk about their initiative. And you know as well as I do that the Boeing and Airbus forecasts for the next 20 years don't include anything about urban air mobility, right? It's just business as usual. So, we're going to have this incredible need that's coming that hasn't even really been identified yet. Civil Air Patrol, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, serving 60,000 volunteers across the country, providing pilot licenses, aviation education. They send kits to schools. Aviation museums, right, up in New York, where Vaughn College is located, the Cradle of Aviation is doing a fair amount of outreach. So how do we just bring all of those things together? And we're also strongly supported in our committee work by the newly stood up FAA's aviation education offices across every region in the United States. So used to be, years ago, for those of you that might remember, there was some infrastructure, and then due to budget cuts, it was one person managing the entire country in terms of aviation education from the FAA. So thankfully, they have put back strong support in each of those regions to support this effort, which we think will be a great way for the FAA to sort of be conveners for those regions. So bring together aviation museums, technical educators, collegiate programs, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Boys and Girls Clubs, as a way to bring us all together and continue to have the conversation about, how do we utilize the tools that we have, whether it's an airport or simulators or an aviation badge or any of those kind of things to help create this pathway. So some of the areas that we've explored, diversity, equity, and inclusion has been something that has been on the minds of aviation and aerospace leaders for a while, and the numbers really haven't moved much, right? We're still only about 7% female in terms of the cockpit. The numbers for aviation maintenance are even worse. It's about 2% female and less than 2% for underserved populations, people of color. So why is it that we have had such a difficult time recruiting underrepresented folks to this industry? Like I said, learning more about current organizations and how to grow awareness, as well as the outcomes. We have amazing outcomes. I'll just get to some of Vaughn's at the end, but we know how life's transforming, becoming part of aviation and aerospace can really be. So how do we get more people to know that story? Like I said, looking at other entry points, urban air mobility, droning, right? Really exciting ways that we can bring materials and ideas to students in the classroom. We don't need necessarily to have a large airplane for that. You know how small drones can be, and students get really excited about those opportunities. Determining how we use current digital tools, especially influencers. There's some terrific Instagrammers who students get very excited about following. And if you watch the FAA's feed at all, they have caught on to this and now work with several influencers to really create this buzz and excitement about aviation. So how do we do more of that? We've talked about developing a nationwide curriculum, possibly the general on the maintenance side, because it gives you a sort of general awareness about aviation and a credential and a ticket that could be worth something. And understanding the information that students, families, caregivers, guidance counselors, teachers need to help to be our cheerleaders and to advocate for us. So these are just sort of 4 areas that are some of our early insights and are helping to shape some of the recommendations that we are coming to. So engagement needs to start really early. From our research, we found that 8 to 10, I'm sure Sun and Fun is nodding their heads here. I can't see you, but I'm assuming you're nodding your heads, is really the sweet spot in terms of, really starting to introduce students to this field. And there is no, as many of you know, there is no golden spike moment, right? We all think, oh, if they go for that Young Eagles demo flight, we got them. And that's often not true because we don't have a very connected pathway, right? So let's say you get something in the classroom at 10 years old. You probably won't right now. Probably middle school is more likely, high school most likely. Far, far too late, right? There's no connected pathway to get you to a very mystifying field, right? Trying to explain to someone what it takes to become a pilot, trying to explain to someone what it takes to become a maintenance technician or an avionics technician or a dispatcher or run an airport, right? Lots of folks who don't have any connection to our industry think we are driven by pilots and flight attendants, and that's it, right? So how do we get folks to think about us as this really vast career path And then that becomes the challenge too. We can be everything, right? You know, every job that exists in aviation, you know, from designing a cockpit to art to, right, you name it. So how do we make sure we're telling enough of a story to get you interested, but also don't limit the breadth and the depth of it? So this idea of a connected pathway becomes really important. Resources for students, caregivers, teachers, guidance counselors. So we've been asked this, and this has been our understanding as we've worked through this, the guidance counselor piece. Guidance counselors, the problem is they don't know enough about aviation, right? So they're a barrier in that they steer them in a different direction to something that they do know, right? It's not that they don't like us, it's just that they don't understand us, right? So how do we make sure we have information available in sort of a one-stop shop, we think, that will allow students to understand the day in the life, the pathway, parents to understand how do I get my child involved in something that they seem to have an interest, or I think this is cool and I want them to follow this pathway. Where's the right place to go for resources? Some place for teachers to go for curriculum, and some place for guidance counselors to go when somebody says, I think I want to do something in aviation, but I don't know what, so that they don't steer them into a different career path. Collaboration is really key, right? If we've got something that's happening at the 8 to 10 and then something that happens in middle school, and then they're getting an AOPA who has a great high school curriculum, how are we making sure that that student is being tracked and getting into the right academic or training program when they're ready? This is the other thing about, you know, thinking about how the FAA might be a convener for all of us in these regions. And then the other big piece, and we know this, right? Two things we've learned, right? Finances and awareness are probably the biggest barriers to joining aerospace and aerospace and aviation, right? If your uncle, brother, cousin, father, that was the traditional path. And so without that connection, how do we make sure that we're growing awareness? And then the other big one is finances, particularly for students from low socioeconomic backgrounds. You know, we know, you know, just from Vaughn's perspective, you know, $70,000 on top of the cost in order to fly, right? Maintenance, roughly $35,000 to $40,000, unless you're fortunate enough to be, and we have one of these in our city as well, you know, a high school program where it's basically free, or some of the ways that Sun and Fun has worked on trying to lower the cost for aviation maintenance. And thankfully, the salaries have moved in the right direction, because it used to be you'd spend that money and then go make, you know, $15, $18 an hour to start. So it was a hard equation to sell students on. The long-term path was much better, but that's really changed, right? Aviation maintenance technicians, at least in New York, will start at $26,000, $27,000, you know, and in pretty short order, based on their work ethic, and, right, can be making six figures as a maintenance technician now. Pilots, you know, the trajectory is just incredible. So it's about, you know, making sure that students and families know the return on investment, which is really important. The other part is, and those of you that are involved in programs like this, is we know that funding is often an issue for these smaller organizations, right? You can spend 90% of your time on trying to submit funding applications for which you get 20 or 30%. So you're always in this fundraising mode and not really able to provide the level of services that you might want to your program. So how do we create a sustainable, maintainable funding stream for these programs so that they don't get into this vicious cycle of apply, beg, 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 and we compete against each other? That's the other problem, right? I'm going to the airlines for funding, you're going to the airlines for funding. You know, how do we create a sustainable resource so that we're not hurting each other in the process? So I gave you the link. If you just Google FAA, you know, YAATF, you'll get the link where you can see the public sessions we've done already. Take a look at our agenda and our minutes if you're interested in more information, and certainly, you know, feel free to reach out to me. So the other thing I wanted to talk a little bit about was Vaughn, and particularly the population that we serve, because I think it's really a good example of, and to give you some tips about how you might do this in your own regions in terms of connecting to local academic and training programs, and provide you with the workforce pipeline you need particularly in terms of underrepresented populations. So we were founded in 1932. We're located in New York City. If you've ever flown into LaGuardia Airport, you've seen us. You just didn't realize it. We're right across the street, across the Grand Central Parkway. Really, you know, our founders were early pioneers in the aviation industry. Our legacy program is really aviation maintenance, but in the last 25 years have really grown into pilot engineering technology. You can see the programs listed there, master's, bachelor's, and associate's degrees in all aspects of aviation, also engineering, technology, and management. 80% of our students are from a minority background. Average family income is about $40,000. So exactly the population that I'm talking about trying to reach. Now, I'm fortunate. I live in a county, Queens County, New York City, has two major airports. It's hard to miss aviation in our neighborhood, right? So that helps. But it's still, you know, fairly mysterious. And lots of folks have service jobs at the airport, ramp, baggage, you know, working in food, those kinds of things. We also do air traffic control, and you know, places like us, we have great toys. So if we can get you in the building and we can show you simulators and, you know, give you a chance to really touch and see what we do, that's a great way to get you excited about the technology and the opportunities. So, you know, probably, and this is a testament to our industry, right? There was a study that was done in 2017 that looked at institutions that were the best at moving students from the bottom 40% income to the top. And we were #1 in the country. And this looked at students 15 years later, so it wasn't right after graduation. It was, you know, 35 years old. I don't know what's special about 35 and what it says about the rest of your life, but it's good. And it's just a testament to how transformational a career in aviation and aerospace can really be. And it's a story that we have to be telling to underrepresented populations. And our placement rates, you know, this year it's 88, but that's really based in COVID. Typically we're at 99, 98, 97% within 1 year of graduation are pursuing their career or continuing their education, typically close to 90% in their field. You know, small class size, that's the nice thing about small institutions. We can really provide that sort of one-on-one attention, especially, you know, the kind of attention that low-income students really need. And more than 90% of students receive financial aid. So how can you connect and find this workforce pipeline, particularly at the academic and the training programs that might be in your area? So my first suggestion is, you know, if you're not seeing the underrepresented population that you would like to have, stop going to the same sources you always have and expecting a different result, right? Reach out to minority-serving institutions, not predominantly white. You know, tribal colleges, historically black colleges and universities, Hispanic-serving institutions. You know, our primary population is Hispanic at about 36%, 20% black, 14% Asian. I'm fortunate to live in a borough that is the most diverse in the country, 144 languages spoken. Diversity is really Vaughn's superpower. But I'm sure you have some of these institutions in your area. The other piece is community colleges, right, which typically serve a lower income student and tend to be more diverse. So reach out to them. And you might suggest, if they don't already offer these opportunities, most of us have industry advisory councils because it's what makes us cutting edge in terms of our curriculum. So offer to sit on those industry advisory councils and give your 2 cents about, you know, here's the skill set that I need when they get to me. Here's the gaps that I'm seeing when they come to me. Here's the training that I might be able to provide while they're still in school so they get to me in better shape, right? All of those things help to make for a more robust pipeline for you and really help the students to be successful no matter where they land. Offer to come speak to students, right? Maybe you try getting into an intro to general management class. Don't go to only into aviation courses. Go into those areas where there's a nice alignment, but not necessarily where students will automatically be thinking about aviation, right? You know, if there's any kind of technical programs at the high school, that's a great place to go. You know, You might even try really non-traditional, go to an English class, right? I mean, usually institutions are really clamoring for a greater and deeper connection with industry. And so they probably welcome you, even if it's outside of class, to come and speak. Scholarships, right? So I showed you and talked about, you know, especially in terms of the Vaughn population, right? It's tough to get to the end. And the other issue is typically with low-income students can get easily knocked off track because if there's sickness in the family, typically living in intergenerational households, right? And we will often get, I got to stop out a semester. My car died. Somebody in the family lost their job. I got sick. Grandma got sick. Somebody got sick. I got to go back to working more hours, right? So if you're able to offer scholarships, paid internships, that's the other key. Don't make students choose between internships and work. I mean, it's nice that they get the 3 credits, but if you want to appeal to a lower income student and really diversify your pipeline, help them so that they don't have to choose. Or, if that's something you don't want to do, consider debt repayment when they get to you. You're seeing a lot of this in finance and healthcare, right? When those students graduate and come to them with debt, they're helping to make their student debt payments. So consider that. And this is really my last word. You know, as we've gone through the cycles of aviation and, you know, they come and go, typically what happens when times are good, industry comes in, takes our students, and then when times are bad, we don't hear from anybody. You know, the key to this recovery is one that's going to last 2 decades, but please don't abandon the institutions that are providing you with the workforce, right? Especially those that are minority-serving institutions. We need that level of engagement in order to sustain us long-term, and we want to be really good partners. So consider how you might work with your local institution to really provide a lifetime of opportunity.